Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now, this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro, and this is what's coming up on the show today. In the wake of yet another publisher closing down its stable of print magazines, we ask the question, what's the future for magazines, print magazines? Will they still be in the shop shelves or just online? We go to Limpopo to find out how community media is coping in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the Herald Newspaper in the Eastern Cape turned 175 years old this week. That's making it the oldest newspaper in the country. And the paper's acting editor speaks to us about this historic milestone. In our News in History feature this week, we take you back to this day in 1994. It was a big day for Nelson Mandela and the country. Can you remember what happened that day? Okay, you'll find out later on in the show. So that's the show, but remember you can engage with us on social media using our Twitter handle, which is #SABC Media Monitor. We'd love to hear from you. Now, before we get into our highlighted stories on the program, let's first take a look at what's on the front pages of your Sunday newspapers this morning. And let's start with the Sunday Times, which is reporting that government has admitted to holding back information from the public on the COVID-19 pandemic, saying that it's doing so to avoid panic. The paper says that the president's spokesperson admitted that modelling data is being kept under wraps after it was questioned by leading experts. The City Press, well, that says that the COVID-19 storm is still on its way. This, as projected mortality rates may vary. Experts are urging testing to be increased and hotspots identified to avoid what could be 48,000 deaths in the next 4 months. South Africa is only expected to reach the peak of the COVID-19 coronavirus in August or September. The Sunday Independent, well, that says the president has been read the Riot Act as the legal fight between him and 3 prominent lawyers over the legality of his National Coronavirus Command Council. The lawyers apparently have accused the president of avoiding accountability and reminded him of his constitutional obligations act with a high standard of professional ethics to ensure transparent governance facilitated by access to information. The Sunday Tribune this week is leading with a story about a clergyman who was arrested after a month-long manhunt. Bishop Begin-Ngobo of the Inkanyezi Church of Christ appeared in court on Friday on charges of contravening the lockdown regulations by publicly encouraging congregants to defy President Ramaphosa's instructions and gather in their numbers for their annual Easter festival during the country's lockdown. The Sunday World is leading with a story reporting alleged ministerial interference by the Minister of Human Settlements, Lindiwe Sisulu, for flouting procurement processes in favor of a company called Empowering Water Solutions. The paper says that a CEO has been suspended for delaying the appointment of Sisulu's preferred supplier. All right, so that's your Sunday papers, and we'll be taking a closer look at those later on. But first, let's see what's been on your social media, and a lot of people rely on this, of course, and that's the list. And I'm going to tell you the usual suspects, but the one that's grabbed my attention, and everybody, I guess, is Mother's Day. And what you've done is that you've started posting messages and pictures of you and your loved ones and your mothers, and some of these pictures are quite amazing, and I love this one. Mums always sacrificing themselves, and if you haven't, send your mother a message, because today's a very special day. We remember these special people who do so much to take care of us, and so happy Mother's Day, and spoil them if you can. Can you cook instead of her cooking today? That would be good. All right, so that was what's trending on social media. Okay, lots still to come. Stay with us. Now, the board of directors of Caxton and CTP Publishers and Printers, publishers of Food and Home and People, announced this past Tuesday that it had begun the process of withdrawing from magazine publishing. This comes shortly after Associate Media Publishing announced that they too are shutting down their doors after 38 years in the media business. Caxton employs some 250 people in its magazine division. Titles affected include Bona, oh my goodness, can you believe life without Bona? Country Life Essentials, Food and Home, Garden and Home, People, Roer Rus, Vrouweker, Woman and Home, and Your Family. I mean, these are iconic titles in South African life. Well, let's take a look and see how you out there were feeling about these titles disappearing.
I'm really disappointed to hear that a lot of print media companies are closing down here in South Africa, because I'm a really big fan of magazines, and I also feel really sad for the people that have actually lost their jobs because of this decision. But I do understand why something like this can happen, because the digital space is just growing really quick, and I feel like there is actually a lot of business online, but there is a target market for the printed content, because there are actually people like me that actually like reading from hard copies.
I can't recall the last time I bought a magazine or a newspaper. I'm not even sure if I've actually ever even bought one, because if there's anything that I need, be it the latest news or the latest gossip, I just log onto my phone and go onto the internet, and all the information that I need is there. So it's quick, it's easy, so you don't even need to go queue for a newspaper or magazine. Everything you need is at your fingertips. So I can't really say I'm saddened that most publications have shut down, because I'm already using my cell phone for all the information that I need.
I'm an avid reader, and I really do enjoy reading from a paper, whether it's glossy, whether it's not glossy. I really still do enjoy reading my newspapers, my magazines, whether it's be about inspiring women or even like house and leisure, guys. I'm dying. I cannot imagine the world without print, let alone South Africa. I mean, how do you get on a plane and they like switch off or put it on flight mode and you don't get a magazine or something to page through? I don't see it happening. I'm not sure how Caxton is going to do this, but can they make a plan for some of us? I understand they have to go digital because it's probably cost effective and everything, but honestly, I can't be looking at this at work and come home to read newspapers on a weekend on a laptop again and still be watching TV. I feel like it's too much for our eyes.
All right, so different thoughts and different ideas, reactions to some of these iconic magazine titles disappearing from our shelves. Well, somebody who understands the challenges of running a print magazine and finding new options online is the editor-in-chief of the Bar Digital Magazine and Destiny Magazine, Onke Dumeko. She joins us now via Skype to tell us what she thinks is the future for print magazine. Onke, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome back to the program. I remember chatting to you soon after you launched Bar Magazine online. How's that been?
Thank you so much for having me again, Peter. The bar's been great. Yeah. We put it on pause towards the end of last year because we just had to reconfigure and rethink the business, especially with Destiny and Destiny Man coming on board. And what you don't want to do, especially in an industry like this, is just kind of have everything, but not have everything running at their optimal level, because people are quite fickle when it comes to content. Like the woman was just saying now, that she prefers to get it on her phone, information on her phone. So you've really got to make sure that what you're bringing is excellent. So we just wanted to onboard Destiny and Destiny Man again, and well, for the first time for us, and then reconfigure the Bar Magazine, which we've done, and then bring it back when we're ready to do so.
All right, okay, so we're seeing iconic titles that have been in South African life for years and years disappearing under the Associated Media umbrella, and also Caxton. Destiny disappeared for a while. You've brought it back, and I wonder, was that brave or foolhardy given what's happening?
Look, I think the opportunity was there. I had left Ndalo Media by the time the company closed. But I'd always grown up with the brand and with so many of the magazine brands. And the one thing that stood out about Destiny was the fact that when it launched in 2007, I remember everyone telling Kanye that no one's going to buy this. After a year, you're going to run out of people to put on the cover. You're going to run out of content. And I think she proved everyone wrong. And, you know, the premise of the brand, the proposition of the brand is so strong, you know, to focus on content that is business related, that is career related, but has an undercurrent of lifestyle, which was so different from what was already in the market, which was a focus on lifestyle and then kind of, you know, a pop of business and career here and there. I think the proposition of the brand represents what people need the most, the majority of the people in the country, and that is how to advance their lives through their careers, through business, and then doing that in a way that's beautifully captured with a lifestyle feel. So while a lot of people might think it was foolhardy of us, I think we knew the decision behind it. I think we still felt that the brand had a place.
Yeah.
And just because a brand doesn't live in the format that it was born in, it doesn't make the brand, doesn't reduce the brand's relevant or, you know.
Okay.
So we still definitely think it's relevant.
All right. So content is always going to be king. And I guess over time, it's kind of how it's consumed that's changed and how it's distributed. So are we saying that people, I mean, I'm a hoarder. I love stacking magazines at home. I love turning pages.
So am I.
I love the crispness of a brand new magazine. Are we saying that people like me are a dying breed and that people are going to consume the same content, but only on screens?
No, I don't think so, hey. Look, I mean, when Edward Enninful took over from the editorship of Vogue UK, the circulation went up by 50% in 6 months. Anna Wintour has, you know, spoken about how even though they migrated to online years ago, there are people and there's a reader that still appreciates the luxuriating feel of a Vogue magazine. And they're from markets which have led the conversation saying print is dead, but they've kept alive a brand that really could have been taken out by the fact that fashion and lifestyle is so much more accessible on your phone. But the key thing here, I think, to understand is that there's a different audience when it comes to print, and there's a different audience when it comes to online.
Right.
I can tell you right now that this card reader is a different person to the Destiny reader who reads the actual publication.
Right.
And also if you consider the geographical placing of where the DestinyConnect.com reader traditionally is, you know, that reader came from Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Namibia, a lot of countries that are outside of South Africa. India, USA, the UK, Poland. So audience-wise already, geographically speaking, there's a different appreciation for that. So the content has to speak to that. And then also the quality of content. Even if you compare Vogue.com and the actual Vogue magazine, you can tell that they're speaking to two different audiences, even though they're talking about the same thing.
All right. So what you're saying
people
is,
like you, people like myself, will still be catered for, I think.
All right. So what you're saying is, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that the content may be similar, but it'll be presented differently because the people who still love to pick up magazines read it in a certain way, and those that are on screens perhaps want their stuff shorter, quicker, whereas I might want to read a longer article because I'm going to keep that magazine for a while.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So format counts. And I mean, like you were just saying now, in your promo for the show, there was a newspaper that celebrated over 100 years of being in existence. When I think it was the Kindle came out, everyone thought that traditional books were dead, and they haven't died. So I think it's if it's one magazine or one title or one publishing house closing, doesn't necessarily mean that the same fate will face every single magazine and every single publishing house. You know, I think content, like any other foundation of any other industry, has to progress and has to evolve. And you can't necessarily always blame it on format.
All right. So, I mean, in the end, magazines are businesses. And the revenue model is, I think, what's changed quite a bit now. So the question is, whilst we might want these magazines, whilst we might still want these publications, if you can't make money from them, you can't keep on printing them. So how do you balance these two forces? Because we're seeing a lot more advertising on your Facebook and all these other social media pages, moving away from traditional places like magazines.
So the Bar Group is a content, it's a content house, essentially. So the content in the Bar Group, you know, comes from television productions, documentaries, films, and then there's also the magazine, the publishing side from it. So we have an understanding that, you know, as when you launch a brand, you're not necessarily going to make a profit in the first year. So you kind of have to offset between the different pockets in the business so that eventually when the other business does break through and start making a profit, nothing suffers, you know. So I think it's also just looking at the structure of the overall business. I think a lot of these publishing houses only publish magazines. So it's different to kind of shift funds around and support the one until it breaks even and all of that. So I think it's a matter of looking at the business, because the revenue model, as you have said, it has changed. But you know, digital rates are far different from what print rates were. You know, a headline banner on a website, there's no way you're going to get the same advertising rate as you would have for, you know, a full page ad or a DPS in the past. So you can't necessarily rely 100% on online advertising. I think you have to be quite smart about the way you funnel funds around your business. And also, most importantly, your overhead costs. Because the size of a publishing team in the past, I don't think it works these days. You know, you kind of need people who are multi-talented, so that and a smaller team that's leaner, so that when it is time for you to be nimble and to pivot.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball, because you, as a manager, have to look into the future and develop strategy. In 5 years' time, will there be lots of spaces on the shelves for magazines still, or is that going to be smaller and smaller with a few select titles, or might they disappear completely, and that you know, when people like me retire, we'll be the last few holding out for print magazines, and that actually in the future everything will be online?
I think there'll be fewer titles. I don't necessarily think they will disappear in 5 years everywhere in the world. Some parts of the world, absolutely, they will cease to exist. But again, I can use the newspaper as an example. Newspapers shouldn't be available now, right? But they still are. So I think it depends on the region, I think it depends on the reader, and that is how, we determine that. But I would, my crystal ball is just saying fewer. It's not saying that all of them will be dead. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to miss quite a few publications that have disappeared now. I'm very old school, maybe, but let's see how the future holds. For me, nothing replaces turning a page. I can't swipe. But Onke, thanks so much for your insights, and good luck with Destiny, both online and in print. And we'll chat again in the near future.
Thank you so much.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so that's Onke Dumego, editor-in-chief of The Bar magazine, as well as Destiny magazines. And you make up your own mind. As I said, I'm very old school. I want to turn a page. I love the gloss. And it'll be sad if magazines continue to disappear in the way that we've seen, particularly in the last couple of weeks. What do you think? Are you old school like me, or are you a digital person and that's all you consume? Hashtag SABC Media Monitor. I'd love to hear from you. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, lots more right here on the program. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, just to let you know, the Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index is out, and the top country on the continent for press freedom is Namibia. South Africa comes in the world, second in Africa, but 23rd in the world. And we will be doing a special feature on that next week. But why I mention this is that sadly across the continent, there's still challenges being faced by journalists. AFP, for example, is reporting that a Mozambican community radio journalist who disappeared on April the 7th in the northern district of Palma, which has been the epicenter of attacks by militants seeking to establish a caliphate. Ibrahimo Abu Maruko went missing on his way home from the radio station in the evening, shortly after texting a colleague to say that he was surrounded by military forces. Barucho had been reporting on daily life in Palma, including the insurgency. The authorities, who denied the militant attacks until late last month, have not officially commented on the case. The Mozambique branch of the Media Institute for Southern Africa has been lobbying President Filipe Nyusi for support in searching for Barucho. Now, London-based Khalsan TV journalist Saeed Yusuf Ali was stabbed to death in Mogadishu yesterday by a knife-wielding man around 7:30 p.m. Ali is reported to have been stabbed 4 times when he stepped in between a man and a woman who appeared to be fighting. According to the National Union of Somali Journalists, passers-by detained the man and handed him over to the police, who are now questioning him on suspicion of deliberately killing Ali. The woman fled the scene, but the police are actively looking for her because they believe that she deliberately allowed herself to be used to attract Ali's attention. Okay, now we go back into our news archives today. And today, exactly today, 26 years ago, former statesman Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as South Africa's first black president. Mandela was sworn in as the first democratic president of South Africa at the Union Buildings in Pretoria after being elected by Parliament without opposition. This is how the SABC covered that historic moment.
Queen Elizabeth and British Prime Minister John Major may visit South Africa soon. That's according to British Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd. He was speaking at a news conference in Pretoria. Earlier, Mr. Hurd was among the many VIPs who witnessed President Nelson Mandela's inauguration at the Union Buildings.
Will you please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God"?
So help me God. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another and suffer the indignity of being the skunk of the world. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement.
21 guns blasted out a salute to the new commander-in-chief, while the South African Air Force mustered its aircraft in formations of 9 in successive dramatic flypasts. It was a day on which South Africa finally came together as one nation. A day on which South Africa was able to show the world the meaning of true national unity.
Those who didn't make it to Pretoria celebrated the occasion at home and in the streets. Katsia Zitzman joined a group in Soweto.
Soweto residents saw President Mandela's inauguration on their television sets. After the new president took the oath, there was little that could stop the festivities, and the party had to be moved outside. The new flag featured, together with that of the ANC. The traditional township vibe was catchy. And in traditional South African style, the action continued around the braaivleis fires. The song was for Mandela, the new president. The neighbors could scarcely escape the spontaneous excitement and joined in. The new South Africa was greeted with overwhelming joy.
What a very, very special time indeed. That's this day 26 years ago, Nelson Mandela becoming the first democratically elected president of South Africa. Okay, now the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic has, like in other parts of the world, hit business quite hard, and print media has been no exception, with advertisers pulling the plug on campaigns as they too struggle to manage their own finances. Reliant on advertising support, community media is under pressure, and to tell us just how much, I'm now joined by Anton van Zyl. He's the editor of 2 community papers, the Zoutpansburger and Limpopo Mirror. Anton, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me here.
All right, so Anton, just how difficult has it been to keep community newspapers and media alive, particularly now with COVID-19 in our midst?
I think extremely difficult. The industry has already been on a lot of pressure before COVID-19. COVID-19 probably just made it a lot more difficult. It sort of pushed the problems forward. To give you an example first of what is happening now, during sort of the first phase of COVID-19 pandemic, or the lockdown, in our province, I'm only aware of 2 newspaper groups that kept on publishing. That was us and one sort of combined newspaper of Caxton. A lot of the independent newspapers also form part of, they get represented by Capro, that sort of ad procurement company. Now, from what I could establish, of all Capro's titles, which is close to 100, only 15 in South Africa continued publishing sort of newspapers. A lot of them went online, but that doesn't really produce any money. For the ones that kept on publishing, it was almost as if you've had the worst of both worlds, because we just had about 0 income with all the expenses. But I think for most of us, it was important to sort of continue being there, continue being a mirror of what is happening in community, sort of just be out there reflecting But it's not easy. Yeah. And even now, my personal feeling is that a lot of these publishers will not reopen, especially the smaller ones. The bigger ones with some resources will still continue, but a lot of the small ones will simply cease operations, which is devastating on a number of sort of arenas. Firstly, it's media diversity, media development, but mostly so for journalism. The voices are going to disappear from communities. The ones that are sort of out there reflecting on what is happening in small villages. Our papers are sort of based, we distribute in rural areas. Those journalists are, I'm afraid, is simply going to disappear. Or they're going to become voices of whether it's NGOs or government, which is also not good. I don't think a lot of people realize worldwide what is happening to local journalism.
So is there a solution? Is there a way to save local journalism? And are we looking at perhaps government support, aid agencies, just to make sure that the public, because ultimately they're the ones that really need this service?
I think maybe the good that comes from this is that it is forcing us to relook at revenue models. For not even decades, a couple of 100 years, newspapers have relied on advertising as a main source of revenue. It's not sustainable. We can point fingers and we can sort of talk about social media, sort of taking all of that, big search engines. The point is we have to look at it and we have to see what are we going to do in terms of revenue models. Government, sure, yes, I can assist, but I don't think government will provide the solution. And again, this is not a South African problem, it's a worldwide problem. We need to look at factors such as a social conscience in terms of advertising, where you would get a big store that, it's about free-range chickens, it's about not buying clothes that comes from some sweatshop in a sort of overseas country. But when it comes to marketing, everything goes. Whatever's the cheapest, that's fine. We need to look at factors like that and say, but should we assist in developing a social conscience among advertisers, trying to secure part of that revenue? We need to look at subscription models which are not really working in this country. We need to look at copyright protection in terms of the articles that we write. It's just when you quickly see it, it spreads on WhatsApp and Facebook and Twitter. You've got no control over that. I think maybe now is the right time to start speaking about these things and say, okay, well, do you want to lose your journalism? Or do we have to work together to try and protect it?
I mean, I think one of the things that we've seen, particularly around community newspapers in many parts of the country, is there's no cover price, and that you recover all your printing costs and salaries and things from the advertising sheets that are put in between the paper. Are we then saying we're going to have to either put a price on the covers of these papers, or are we saying that, we have to let go of print and maybe start concentrating online because data is coming down, because smartphone penetration is increasing? Is that ultimately the way that we're going to have to go?
Well, it's difficult. Our papers we've got a cover price, so both the Soutpansberger and the Limpopo Mirror that we run have been sold for 30 plus years. But it's getting more and more difficult. The expectation is there that news should be free. And again, I don't think journalists really mind about that. They want their message out. But journalists need to be paid. You can't expect them all to work for free and then at the same time got all these standards that they need to provide investigative journalism, they need to be ethical, they need to prescribe to press codes. You talk about professional people who need to be remunerated. It costs money. Online definitely is the way to go. We should sort of also look at the suggestions that data to news sites should be free. But again, that the problem comes with online is that it's at this stage with the models in place. It's cutthroat. There's just no money to be made there. You have to compete against others who go for the millions. And again, where local journalism comes in is we don't target millions. We actually target small little groups of people. You know, whether it's communities of interest, geographic communities, and we do not have the numbers and we don't want to chase the numbers. Online models are based on big numbers. So that also needs to be discussed.
So, you know, I'm wondering if there isn't space for private sector, businesses to look upon community newspapers perhaps as CSI projects that they invest in, as opposed to purely seeing them as advertising portals. I
must agree. I think that's part of the direction that we'll need to go into. But it's back to where I said, if you market, there need to be some sort of social conscience. You need to see the effects of what you're doing. If you want to invest in a medium that encourages false news, you know, just sort of dangerous rumors to spread, you need to rethink your attitude towards your own community. On the other hand, it is dangerous to be dependent on one or two sponsors. You know, you want your independence. And with advertising, there's always the criticism that, yes, you're not going to sort of write bad things about your biggest advertiser. But somehow throughout the years, it sort of balanced itself out. I believe with sponsors, programs where people come and say, okay, well, we support. And perhaps also we need to look at a tax base where you say, okay, well, local journalism, as is any journalism, but I'm specifically biased towards local journalism. It's such an important part of our communities. I mean, they're the ones who write the obituaries. They're the ones who sit in town council meetings, report on what's happening there. They sit in the courts. You can't sort of let them just disappear. You're going to have, it's going to be terrible consequences. So yes, big business, government, I think they will have to have a serious look at the sector and realize what is happening. All right,
so your publication's still printing, but if this COVID-19 continues for quite a while, will you survive?
We're lucky. We've been in existence for 30 plus years, and I've had the business for close on 20 years. Which means that at least you've got some savings. We're seriously dipping into those savings. And like all the others, I mean, like any other small business, exactly the same. At one stage or the other, you will have to decide, listen, are we going to pull the plug and stop now, or are we going to continue? On our side, we will continue. And journalism has never been a business just about money. It's always, you deal with dreamers, you deal with idealists. And for that reason, it's unthinkable for us just to let go. But yes, it'll only continue for that long.
Anton van Zyl, I can tell that this is something from your heart, a labor of love, and we wish you the best. And let's hope that you can continue to produce these publications of yours. Thanks so much for your time and good luck.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Okay, so that's Anton van Zyl speaking about the challenges that community newspapers are facing, and perhaps we need to help them find ways to make sure that they continue. Those of us who can afford to contribute in some way, maybe that's something to think about, because ultimately a lot of readers, millions across the country, are reliant on these local publications for information. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more for you on Media Monitor. Take care. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel. So 175 not out. That's the milestone reached by the Herald Newspaper this past week. First published on the 7th of May, 1845. The paper celebrated its status as the oldest newspaper in South Africa from its heartland in Port Elizabeth in the Eastern Cape. The paper produced this video that we're going to show you to tell the story of this historic journey. Let's take a look.
How do we celebrate one of the oldest newspapers in the country? How do we put into words the journey we've walked? Where do we begin to count the people we've met or commemorate past heroes? Over the decades, we've brought you the news and you've walked with us through every season. You've opened your hearts, let us into your homes, special places and spaces we'll never forget. Together we've won, together we've lost, and here we are still. Here's to 175 years. Here's to all the things we wish and dreams. With you, I'd like to celebrate, because without you, we never could have made it this far.
Quite incredible. To talk to us about this milestone, we're now joined via Skype by the acting editor at the Herald Newspaper, Rochelle de Kock. Rochelle, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and happy birthday. 175 years. That's an incredible milestone for a paper to reach, anything to reach actually, that age. Take us through, I don't know, the history, the heritage that's kept this paper going for nearly 200 years.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you for having us. You know, it's quite something special to be able to celebrate 175, you know, particularly of a newspaper in these trying times for print media, as you're aware. So the Herald's history started as far back as 1845, as you mentioned. It was started by one of the Scottish named John Patterson. You'll also know him as later having been involved in founding Standard Bank and Grey High School, Port Elizabeth. But over the years, he basically started off, as you know, back then, it was adverts mainly on the front page. But he slowly but surely used what was called Eastern Province Herald at the time to basically start debates to try and rouse civil society into getting things like roads, you know, a military board and so on. And successfully through his editorials and some of the stories that they were pushing at the time, they've managed to achieve quite a lot. And over the years, you know, the Herald has entrenched itself really as just this really historic legacy brand in Port Elizabeth. Many people who live here would be able to tell you it's very difficult to think of the Port Elizabeth without the Herald. And so throughout the years, you know, it just continued to, you know, provide that kind of very community focused and even like regional and Eastern Province, Eastern Cape kind of coverage over the years. And that hasn't changed, except over the years, as you know, the print run declines, particularly with digital, on the onset of digital news and social media. But the Herald is still going strong. The Herald is completely entrenched in the community of Port Elizabeth.
So is this talking very much about local is lekker, you know, where generation after generation, it's about having this relationship with the local people, reporting about stuff that they are interested in and reflecting their lives in many ways, and also capturing those iconic moments that have affected the country?
Exactly that, Peter. We always say there should be nothing that happens in Nelson Mandela Bay. For those who don't know Port Elizabeth, Newcastle and Dispatch, there should be nothing that happens in that city that the Herald is not aware of. It's very much about your bread and butter issues. We're very big on local council politics and what it exactly means for each and every resident in the city. We're very much on local sport. So it's really just the paper of the people of the city. And we do expand to a large extent, more so of late, is just to get your provincial picture and everything that you need to know about your province. We can improve, definitely there, but we mainly, I would say, entrenched in Nelson Mandela Bay. And yes, we do give, whatever you need to know, particularly the big news from a national perspective, with copy that we syndicate from our national titles within the Arena platform.
Or do you think you're going to make 200, given the world that we're living in?
I think the Herald as a brand definitely would reach 200. I don't know so much about the print publication, Peter. As you know, the print readership is, by and large, an older readership. It's very much become a niche market. But as the Herald, we do have a strong print loyal readership base. The people who want to physically have the paper in their hands, they want to read what the views are of, the fellow residents in the city, the crosswords. We've got a big following with that, and just having the local sport. But we've also embraced the digital, and it's been phenomenal. The uptake has been phenomenal. We keep it true to our brand, which is, local, hyper-local, and that's where we basically, I would say, cater for everyone else who's, sort of falling back and not really taking interest in the print product anymore. But we'll definitely, I think the Herald brand
will be there, years. But perhaps in different forms. Okay, so congratulations on 175 years. Let's fast forward to today. I don't know if there's any newspaper that sort of grabbed your attention and a story that sort of hit you straight when you looked at it.
Look, I definitely think the COVID-19 is still the biggest topic at the moment, and the City Press and the Sunday Times both led with it today. Slightly different stories, but I think the stories that they are painting is basically that things are about to get more difficult for us as a country. The City Press talking about the fact that if we don't flatten this curve, and some experts weighing in that if there's no focus particularly on hotspot areas, that as a country we are in serious trouble of not having a handle on this pandemic. Sunday Times, talking about the government wanting to sort of reduce or not let the public panic too much about what the real statistics are looking like or what they foresee. So that's definitely the biggest topic at the moment. But what I do want to highlight is what you'd see on page 7 of the Sunday Times today, and that is the faces of COVID-19. Those are the people, it's just really giving life and just telling us about the people who have died from this virus. And I think it paints a picture, and it's really a sobering one, about I suppose just giving personality and faces to what we see as statistics every day. And it's very important. I know particularly as a news organization, stigma is a big problem, and it's something that we've covered even in our own publication. People are not keen to even give us information about their family members who may have passed on from COVID-19 because they're worried about the stigma. that is then attached to them and being ostracized by the community as a result of being associated as having coronavirus. So it's really, it's important for us, I think, as the media to just really just give faces and personalities to these statistics that we see every day.
Rochelle, we're going to have to leave it there, but congratulations on your 175 years. Great having you on the program. Hopefully we can chat to you again in the near future, and good luck with the next 25 to reach your double century.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. That's Rochelle de Kock, who's the acting editor of the Herald, which turned 175. It's a Nelson Mandela Bay, Port Elizabeth based newspaper. And that's where sadly we're going to have to say goodbye to you on Media Monitor. Thanks very much for joining us. Join us again at the same time next week. In the meantime, wash your hands, social distance, and wear your masks. Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.